Man Chong was initially employed under Cao Cao before he went on to serve Wei for 50 years. He was uncompromising when it came to the law and was a level-headed tactician who did not make foolish mistakes whilst often thinking about the bigger picture. He's best known for defending the eastern border against Wu during a series of invasions at Hefei. He further strengthened the Eastern Front before ending his service as one of the Three Excellencies. Chen Shou appraised him as ambitious, resolute, courageous and resourceful. He was born before 175 and was from Shanyang Commandery. When he was 17, he came to serve as an investigator and discovered a group of armed thugs led by Li Shuo who were harming the public. Man Chong arrested Li Shuo and his cohorts and then got them to confess their guilt, after which they did not offend again. As he grew older, he was elevated to the magistrate of Shanyang. A corrupt and greedy county investigator was soliciting bribes which caused trouble for the government. Man Chong led a group of armed guards to the culprit's house, then arrested him. After he died under torture during the interrogation on the same day, Man Chong resigned and went home. Between 191 and 192 he was recruited by Cao Cao as an assistant officer. As Cao's power rose in Yan province, so did Man Chong's. He served in the administration before being appointed as the prefect of Xuchang. During his tenure here between 196 and 200, he got into two controversial incidents. The first is when he arrested and punished some of Tao Hong's retainers who repeatedly violated the law. Man Chong ignored Tao Hong's threats if they weren't released, so he wrote to Cao Cao instead. When Man Chong heard of this, he had the prisoners executed immediately. There were two different recordings of Cao Cao's praise to Man Chong. "Isn't this what an office holder should do?" and "Here is real attention to duty." In the second incident, Yang Biao was imprisoned for allegedly conspiring with Yuan Shu, who had just declared himself emperor. The two were related by marriage, and Tao didn't like the idea of having a potential spy around, so he slandered him, saying that Yang Biao was planning to replace the emperor. Man Chong was assigned to investigate the situation, but he was told by Shunye and Kongrong to go easy on Yang Biao as they believed he was innocent. Man Chong ignored them and done everything by the book, including some form of torture, but Yang Biao had nothing to say. After several days, Man Chong said, "Yang Biao has been examined and makes no change in his statement. This man is known within all the 4 seas. If you punish him without good evidence of his guilt, you will certainly lose many people's affections. In my humble opinion, you should reconsider the matter." Cao Cao had faith that Yang Biao was telling the truth, because Man Chong did not hold back in his interrogation and so had him released later that day. Shunye and Kongrong were initially angry towards Man Chong, but became more friendly towards him after they heard what he said to Cao Cao. Pei Songzhi criticised Man Chong's torture of Yang Biao, who was known for being virtuous. Even though Man deserved praise for doing things by the book, it was not enough to make up for his cruelty. At the time when open conflict broke out between Yuan Shao and Cao Cao, there were many groups of armed men in strongholds scattered throughout Runan Commandery which were loyal to Yuan Shao. Man Chong was appointed as its administrator to deal with the loyalists so they don't pose a threat to Shu City whilst Tao's main force is away. He was able to recruit 500 of Yuan's men, who then went on to capture 20 or so camps for him. Some form of trickery was then used to lure the remaining leaders into a trap, where over 10 of them were killed. He then put the men to work in the fields in accordance with the Tongjian system, then Runan became pacified. His efforts resulted in 20,000 households and 2,000 fighting men being added to the Tao Wei state. In 208, he led his troops from Runan to join Tao's main force as they campaigned south to capture Jing province. Following their defeat at Chibi, he was ordered to remain behind, so he stationed his troops at Dangyang. When the subsequent battle of Jiangling was lost, he was ordered to abandon his post, so he returned to Runan where Cao Cao ennobled him to a secondary marquis. Over a decade later, following a flood which utterly destroyed the Wei forces, Guan Yu attacked Fan Castle. Man Chong once more led his troops from Runan to support Tao Ren at the partially flooded castle. The defences were crumbling and the troops were nervous. Some even suggested that they flee before the walls are completely surrounded. Man Chong explained the situation. "The flood came swiftly, and we can hope that it will go just as fast. I hear that Guan Yu has already sent a detachment towards Yingchuan, and the whole area south of Shu City is disturbed. The reason Guan Yu does not go forward is because he's afraid our army may cut off his rear. Once we run away, we should have lost everything south of the Yellow River. You must stay here." He then sacrificed his own white horse in the water, then swore an oath before the defenders to stay with them till the end. The men rallied around Man Chong, who fought on until Shu Huang arrived with Wei reinforcements. He then joined the attacking force that lifted the siege and eventually drove Guan Yu away. For his efforts, Man was promoted to a village marquis. When Tao Pi came into power, he promoted Man Chong to general who spreads martial might. In late October of 222, Tao Ziyu, Zhang Liao and Zhang Bao were sent to attack Dongku in accordance with Tao Pi's three-pronged invasion of Wu. By early 223, Man Chong had been given command of one of the vanguard forces during the battle. He set up the Wei army north of the Jing Lake, opposite the enemy who were positioned on the other side. Man Chong said, "Tonight the winds are unfavourable to us. The thieves will surely try to employ fire against us. We must be prepared for when they do." And so the entire army went on high alert. At midnight, the enemy sent 10 divisions to burn down the Wei camps, but due to Man Chong's preparations, the attack was thwarted. Even though they were eventually defeated in battle, Man Chong was made a Marquis of Nanxiang for successfully defending his forward base. The following year, he was granted the ceremonial battle axe and with it, authority over the Wei military. Then 2 years later, he was elevated to General of the Van. When Tao Rui came into power in 226, he blessed Man Chong as a Marquis of a Changyi. Then 2 years later, he was assigned as Inspector of Yu Province. Come springtime, defectors from Wu arrived, bearing news that Sun Quan was personally leading forces to attack Wei, north of the Yangtze River. Man Chong was able to predict where the attack would take place, so reinforced the area around Xiyang. This forced Sun Quan to withdraw, once he had learned that his enemy was aware of his movements. In the autumn of the same year, Fang faked joining the Wei forces. Sima Yi was skeptical about the defection and wanted to take precautions, but Tao Ziyu was duped. Under orders from Tao Rui, he led his forces towards Lujiang. Sima Yi advised to launch attacks against the southern fortresses, so Man Chong was ordered to march on Xiaku. He also showed his concern about Tao Ziyu's leadership when he wrote to the throne. Though clear in mind and resolute, Tao Ziyu has seldom participated in battle. The route he now takes has lakes at the rear and the Jiang on the side. It is one where advance is easy and retreat is difficult. This is what's called entangling ground. If entering Wu Jiangku, great caution will be necessary. Before the imperial court could respond to the letter, Tao Ziyu had already met Lu Xun at Shiting, lost a battle against him and retreated back north. Thanks to the arrival of Zhu Ling's reinforcements, Tao Ziyu escaped with his life but died the next year from his wounds. After he passed away, Man Chong was ordered to replace him as the supervisor over military operations in Yang province. The people of Runan had grown so fond of Man Chong during his tenure that they wanted to follow him to his new headquarters, and his efforts to stop them were not listened to. Tao Rui was advised to execute a local leader as an example to the others, but he didn't approve. As a compromise, he said 1,000 hand-picked people from Runan could go along with Man Chong, whilst the rest had to remain behind. Man Chong was made the general who attacks the east in 230, then that winter he received news that Sun Quan was planning to attack Hefei. Bearing in mind that the second battle of Hefei, which famously involved Zhang Liao, occurred earlier in the year 214. Man Chong received reinforcements from Yan and Yu provinces as he stepped up the defences at Hefei. When Sun Quan arrived, he saw the strong defences, so feigned a retreat, then waited 10 days until the Wei Emperor ordered that the reinforcements had to leave. Sun Quan attacked properly upon hearing of this, but Man Chong knew he was only pretending to retreat in the first place to put him off guard. The reinforcements had not actually left, so Hefei remained well defended. When the Wu forces arrived once more, they could see they would never breach the walls and so had to withdraw. Another defector from Wu wrote to Wei in 231. Sun Bu secretly sent a messenger to Wang Ling, where he asked for soldiers to help escort him over. The letter was passed on to Man Chong, who suspected it was a ruse, so he refused to send any troops. He also wrote a reply to Sun Bu in Wang Ling's name. These two acts caused Wang Ling to not be on good terms with Man Chong. In the letter, he commended Sun Bu's desire to return to the path of righteousness, whilst politely declining to send troops. He instead suggested that Sun should think of some secret scheme to act out when the time is right. Having just been denied by Man Chong, Wang Ling sought to remove him from his position. He told Tao Rui that Chong was a decrepit senile alcoholic and was unsuitable for such an important position. The Emperor was going to dismiss Man Chong, but his supporters within the court highlighted his 20 years of meritorious service. It was decided it was best to meet him in person before a decision was made, so Man Chong accepted his invitation, then headed to the imperial court. His chief clerk was given explicit instructions to not give Wang Ling any troops should he come asking for them. As such, he was unable to get any troops for Man Chong's units, and so sent 700 of his own men to go and meet Sun Bu. As suspected, a night ambush was launched where around half the Wei soldiers were killed. Meanwhile, at the capital, Man Chong appeared to be in good health, and so remained sober as they passed around drinks. Tao Rui concluded that the rumours were untrue and so sent Man Chong to return to his post, but he wanted to remain in Luoyang. He repeatedly asked permission from his emperor for this, but was always denied. Tao Rui ultimately compared him to past heroes whom he should act more like. One ate and drank heavily to prove he was in good health, whilst another rode on horseback in reverse to show he was still fit for battle. Tao was unpleased with Man Chong for still insisting he was too old for the front line when he had already been found to be strong and healthy. At this time, Sun Xuan was eager to conquer Yang province. He came up with a new plan every year. Lu Xun led troops to attack Lujiang in 232, so Man Chong's subordinates warned him to lead reinforcements to the area. Lujiang may be small, but its troops are well trained and seasoned in battle. They can definitely defend Lujiang for some time. Besides, as the enemy has left their ships and travelled 200 li deep into our territory, their rear must be unguarded. We should use this opportunity to lure them deeper into our territory and wait for an opportunity to strike back. Let's allow them to push further in. By the time they want to retreat, it will be too late for them. He assembled his troops at the appropriate location, which caused Lu Xun to withdraw his forces once he learned of their position. The next year, Man Chong devised a plan to move some of the troops out of Hefei to build a new fortress some 10 miles west of the city. Hefei had a river and a lake to the south, with a high location to the east, where Man Chong planned to build a new castle. The idea was to lure the Wu army to attack the weakened Hefei on level terrain. Then the soldiers from the new fortress could charge out, cut off their retreat route and destroy them. This idea was actually initially refused at the imperial court, as Jiangxi thought it would display weakness to Wu, which would encourage Hefei to come under attack. But this was exactly what Man Chong was counting on, so he quoted Sun Tzu in his second memorial to the court. War is a matter of deception. Therefore, when we are able, we make a show of inability to the enemy. We make him arrogant by giving him the advantage in showing fear. This shows that appearance and reality need not correspond. One who is skillful at keeping the enemy on the move maintains a deceitful appearance, according to which the enemy would act. Now if we move our fortress further inland, it's feigning weakness. If we make the rebels leave the water far behind, while we ourselves move along the lines of advantage and act from the exterior, then good fortune will be brought about in the interior. The master of writing Zhao agreed that this plan was noteworthy and important, so Tao Rui allowed it. Xincheng, or the new fortress city of Hefei, was then constructed. As predicted by Man Chong, Sun Xuan arrived with his forces later that year, and he wanted to attack the new fortress. He was hesitant to launch an all-out attack due to its location, so they remained on their boats for around 20 days, where Sun Xuan started to feel faint. During this time, Man Chong predicted that Sun Xuan would lead his army inland to brag about how powerful it is, so he had 6,000 men wait in ambush. When the Wu troops came forward to display their might, they were beset upon. Hundreds of Wu troops lost their lives. It was a disastrous defeat, as many drowned when they fled to their ships. Sun Xuan returned the very next year, in accordance with the Shu-Wu alliance, to attack Wei's eastern and western fronts. 100,000 Wu troops arrived at Hefei, which was being defended by Tian Yu. Man Chong wanted to lead his troops to reinforce the area immediately, but Tao Rui refused. Tian Yu already had plans to let the Wu troops tire themselves out a bit before the Wei reinforcements arrived. Man Chong suggested that whilst they wait, the troops on leave should be recalled to bolster their numbers. Liu Xiao agreed with this, and further proposed that Man Chong attempts to exaggerate his numbers when they arrive. Man Chong then suggested abandoning Hefei altogether to lure the Wu army closer to Shuchun, so they could decisively defeat them in battle. Tao Rui could not agree to this, however, as he saw Hefei as far too valuable to abandon. He then granted Man Chong 5,000 infantry and 3,000 cavalry to go and relieve the siege of Hefei. Under Liu Xiao's suggestion, Man Chong's men made a great clamour when they arrived. They planted banners and beat the drums in great numbers to make a show of force, whilst the cavalry charged behind the Wu forces to cut off their supply lines. The Wu forces were already drained and suffering from disease, so they fled at the sight of the fresh troops and over fears of losing their retreat route. Man Chong handpicked a few dozen men, armed them with torches, and then led them into battle. The wind was favourable towards them as they set fire to the Wu siege machines. Then Man Chong also shot and killed Sun Quan's younger nephew, Sun Tai. In the springtime of the same year, thousands of peasants were sent north by Sun Quan to set up agricultural colonies. Man Chong waited until November, when he deemed that the harvest would be ripe, the peasants would be reaping the fields, and the town guards would be away from their settlements. At this opportune time, Man Chong launched a surprise attack, destroying all the towns and burning the fields. This earned all of those under him who performed good service rewards from the Wei court. 4 years later, Man Chong stepped down from his position at Hefei and retired to Luoyang, where he served as a Grand Commandant. He didn't accumulate much money for his family, so he was quite poor in his old age. Tao Rui praised Man Chong for his dedication and loyalty to the state, then rewarded him with land, grain, and 200,000 coins. His marquis title was elevated, and the number of taxable households he held steadily increased over the years until it reached 9,600. He died 3 years later in 242 during the reign of Tao Rui's adopted son Tao Fang, where he was honoured once more with posthumous titles. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button, and I'll see you next time.